Don't forget to like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The rain was relentless that night, a steady drumming against the roof, turning the streets into glistening rivers of reflected light. I had always found something soothing about the sound of rain, the way it blurred the edges of the world and made everything feel quieter, more intimate. But that night, the rain felt different, like a backdrop to something. I wasn't prepared, for I was standing in my kitchen, absent-mindedly drying the dishes, when the doorbell rang. It was too late, for unexpected visitors my husband Mark had left earlier in the evening for a weekend business retreat. So I was home, alone. A flicker of unease passed through, but when I peered through the PO, I let out a relieved breath. It was Adam, Mark's best friend. Adam had been a part of our lives. For nearly 2 decades, he and Mark had met in college and had been inseparable ever since he was a fixture at our barbecues, family gatherings, and game nights. If there was anyone I could trust showing up unannounced this late, it was him. But something about the way he stood, under the porch light, rain dripping from his dark hair, sent a ripple of curiosity. Through me, I pulled the door open. Adam, what are you doing here? Heist's expression was guarded, but his blue eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't mean to just drop by, he said, shoving his hands into the pockets of his damp jacket. But I was driving home, and he trailed off, his jaw tightening. I needed to talk to someone. There was an unfamiliar weight to his voice, something uncharacteristically vulnerable. Adam was usually the life of the party, the guy with the quick jokes, the easy charm. Seeing him like this, uncertain and hesitant, made me uneasy. Come in, I said, stepping aside. He hesitated for just a second before stepping inside, as he shrugged off his jacket. I noticed the way his shoulders saged slightly, as if he was carrying something heavy. Let me get you a towel, I offered, heading toward the hallway closet. When I returned, he was standing in the living room, staring at the rain-spattered window, lost in thought. I handed him the towel, and he murmured a quiet thanks before running it through his damp hair. You want some coffee? I asked, trying to ease whatever tension was in the air. He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for something to do. As the coffee brewed, the air between felt thick with something unspoken. I wasn't sure if I should wait for him to speak. First, finally, as I set a mug in front of him, he exhaled sharply. I've been keeping something inside for a long time, he said, his fingers tightening around the ceramic, and I don't think I can anymore. I sat across from him, my stomach tightening. What is it? He hesitated, staring into his coffee like it held the answers he was searching for. Then, in a quiet, almost broken voice, he said, I'm in love with you. CLA. The words settled between us like a thunderclap, even though the only sound in the room was the rain. I blinked my breath, catching in my throat of all the things I had expected him to say. This wasn't one of them. For a moment I thought, maybe I had misheard him, that maybe the storm outside had distorted his words, but the way he looked at me, raw, unguarded, left no room for misinterpretation. Adam, I started, but I didn't even know what I meant to say. I know, he cut in, shaking his head. I know how this sounds. I know what this means, but I can't pretend anymore. I felt the heat rise to my face, a mix of shock and something else, something I didn't want to name. Adam had always been Mark's best friend. He had always been my friend too, but I had never even allowed myself to consider anything beyond that. You've been drinking, I said, searching for some kind of explanation. He let out a humorless laugh. No, I wish I could blame it on that. I wish this was something I could shrug off tomorrow, but it's not. It's real, CLA. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the edge of Thedible. Adam, you can't say things like that. I have to, he said, leaning forward, because it's the truth, and I don't expect anything from you. I swear I don't, but I needed you to know, because pretending doesn't make it any less real. I shook my head, my pulse sounding in my ears. This was too much. Too sudden. My marriage wasn't perfect. But Mark and I had built a life together. We had history, memories, a foundation. Adam's confession threatened to shake all of that. I took a deep breath. I don't know what you expect me to say. Don't expect anything, he admitted, but I couldn't keep it in anymore. The air between us was charm-dead, heavy with something. Unsaid, I could see the longing in his eyes, the quiet desperation of someone who had held onto something for too long, and in that moment, I felt something stir inside me, an echo of a feeling I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. But acknowledging it would change everything, and I wasn't sure I was ready. For that the silence between us stretched thick, and unyielding the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, and the rain still relentless against the windows. I felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, my mind scrambling to process what Adam had just confessed. I shouldn't have said anything, he muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. I've probably ruined everything. I shook my head slowly, though. I wasn't even sure what I was denying. His words, the truth behind them, or the effect there were, having on me. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break. Through my ribs, no. I whispered, "You haven't ruined anything." His gaze snapped up, searching my face. "Then say something. Anything." I swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Adam, you're my husband's best friend. You've been in our lives. For so long, I never and ever thought you felt this way." He let out a low, humorless chuckle. "That's because I never let you see it. I buried it for years. Do you know how hard that's been?" His voice was quiet, but full of emotion, his fingers gripping the coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him steady. I had no idea how to respond. My instinct was to tell him he was wrong, that what he felt was misplaced. But that would be a lie. I had seen the way he looked at me, sometimes longer than necessary, as if he were memorizing me. I had just never allowed myself to question. I exhaled slowly. "Adam, I love Mark." I know he smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's why I never said anything. That's why I told myself I could live with it. But lately, Claire, I don't know, it's getting harder. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to think clearly. Why now? Why tell me tonight? He hesitated, then said, "Because I saw you at the grocery store earlier today. You were laughing at something," the cashier said, "and for just a second you looked so happy." And I thought to myself, what if that had been my life? What if I had told her sooner? I felt something tighten in my chest. "Adam," I whispered. He gave me a sad smile. "I know it's selfish, and I don't expect you to feel the same way, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed you to know." I stared at him, my emotions wearing inside me. Part of me wanted to shut this down, to tell him we could never talk about this again. But another part of me, the part that was buried deep, the part I never acknowledged, felt something stir, a memory surface. Done bidden years ago, before Mark and I had married Adam, and I had shared a moment, brief, fleeting, but real. It was during one of those summer nights when we were all younger, before life had settled into routines and responsible IDs. Mark had left the party early, and Adam and I had stayed behind, talking for hours on the porch swing. The air thick with something unspoken. Nothing had happened. Nothing was ever said. But I remembered the way he had looked at me that night. Had I even something back then? Had I buried something just as he had? I shook my head as if trying to shake off the weight of my own thoughts. "Adam, this is a lot to take, and I know." He stood abruptly, running hand through his hair. "I should go." I didn't stop him. He grabbed his jacket and walked to the door, but just as he raked for the handle, he turned back. "It mayn't what I said, Claire, and no matter what happens, I'll always be here, even if it's just as a friend." I swallowed hard, nodding goodnight. "Adam," he hesitated for just a fraction of a second, before opening the door and stepping into the rain. I stood there for a long time, After he left staring at the closed door, my heart still racing, and I knew deep down I would never be able to forget what he had said. I barely slept that night every time. I closed my eyes. Adam's words were played in my mind like an echo. I couldn't silence. I couldn't keep pretending. Anymore, I needed you to know. I told myself it didn't change. Anything, I was married to Mark, and we'd built a life together. Solid, steady, and familiar. But even as I tried to convince myself, a part of me knew that things wouldn't be the same. After tonight. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind damp streets, and the crisp scent of fresh rain in the air. Mark was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee and his laptop open in front of him. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Morning." My voice was horror, and I wondered if he could hear the exhaustion in it. I busied myself making coffee, avoiding his gaze. Me hands were steady, but inside I felt shaken. Should I tell him? Would that make it easier? As I poured my coffee, Mark finally looked up, his brow furrowed slightly. "You okay?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." He nodded, already distracted by his emails. It was so typical, so routine. And yet, for the first time, it felt like there was a wall between us, one that hadn't been there before, and I hated that I spent the rest of the day trying to push Adam's confession to the back of my mind. I ran errands, answered emails, even called a friend, just to hear a familiar voice, but no matter what, I did. My thoughts kept drifting back to last night, the way Adam had looked at me, the weight in his voice, the way my heart had reacted to spite myself by late afternoon. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I grabbed my phone and hesitated for a long moment before finally typing, "A message me. Can we talk?" The 3 little dots appeared immediately. Then his reply came. "Adam." Of course, when and where. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Meeting him felt like crossing a line, but I also knew I couldn't leave things unresolved. Me, the park, 6 p.m. "Adam, I'll be there." The park was quiet when I arrived. The rain had left, the air cool and crisp, the grass still damp beneath my shoes. I spotted Adam near a bench, his hands stuffed in his pockets. His expression, unreadable as I approached, he offered a small tentative smile. Hey. I sat down beside him, keeping a careful distance between us for a moment. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched heavy and UNC. Then I took a deep breath. "Adam, I don't know what to say." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the small pond in front of us. "I see it." I looked down at my hands. "You caught me off guard last night. I mean, I had no idea. I never wanted you to." He let out a quiet sigh. "I never planned to say anything, Claire. But when I did, it felt like I could finally breathe after years of holding it in." I turned toward him, searching his face. Why now, though? Why not before Mark and I got married? Why not when? It could have made a difference. His lips pressed into a thin line. Because back then, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could be your friend and nothing more. But over time, it got harder. And lately, I don't know. Maybe it's selfish, but I couldn't keep pretending. I closed my eyes for a moment. "You know this changes things, right?" He nodded. "I know." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Adam, I love my husband." He exhaled softly. "I know, and I can't. I won't do anything to hurt him." He gave me a sad smile. "I'd never ask you." I looked away, my heart heavy. "Then where does that leave us?" He was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "That's up to you, Claire." I wanted to tell him that nothing had changed, that we could go back to the way things were before. But deep down, I knew that was a lie, because something had changed. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew that after tonight, I would never look at Adam the same way again, and that terrified me. I drove home, in silence, the weight of the conversation with Adam pressing on my chest like a heavy stone. My mind was a whirlwind, of emotions, guilt, sadness, and something else I wasn't ready to name. I had spent years thinking I knew where I stood in my life, in my marriage, in my friendships. But tonight had shaken the foundation of everything I thought was certain by the time I pulled into the driveway. The sky had darkened, and the house was glowing softly from the lights. Inside, Mark was home. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The familiar scent of his colon lingered in the air, and the sound of the television played from the living room he was sitting on. The couch relaxed a beer in his hand. "Hey," he said, glancing up at me. "Where were you?" The question was casual, but I felt a flicker of unease. I had nothing to hide, and yet I hesitated. I went for a walk in the park. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Mark nodded, not thinking much of it. Long day. I exhaled. "Yeah." He patted the couch beside him. "Come sit with me." I walked over and sat down, feeling the warmth of his presence next to me for a moment. We just sat there, the sound of the TV filling the space between us, and that's when it hit me. This us was real. This was the life I'd built, the man I had chosen. And despite everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, despite the unexpected confession that had stirred something deep inside me, this was the only place I wanted to be. I turned to Mark, studying the lines of his face, the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration. As he watched the screen, I had spent so many years beside him, and yet tonight I felt like I was truly seeing him again. He must have sensed my stare, because he turned his head, raising an eyebrow. What? I smiled softly. "Nothing, just, I love you." His expression shifted, surprised at the sudden tenderness in my voice. Then his features softened and he reached for my hand. "I love you too, Claire." I leaned, my head against his shoulder, closing my eyes. Whatever had happened with Adam, whatever feelings had surfaced, didn't change the fact that my heart already belonged to someone, and that was enough. A week later, Adam left town for a work project overseas. He sent me a short message. Before he left, Adam, "Take care, Claire. I'll always be here if you need me." I stared at the message for a long time, before finally replying, "Me, you too." Adam, I didn't know if things would ever fully go back to how they were before. But maybe that was okay. Life had a way of surprising us, off testing the strength of the choices we made. And in the end, it wasn't about the words left unspoken or the roads not taken. It was about the love we chose. Every single day, the end.